And so the other side of that is, the better you are, in theory, the less your character has to be, because your character has the character. Excuse my language, but the character has to match your bullshit. So if like, or the
Mm,
game has to match your bullshit rather. So if you are a really really good player, there's some ego and other stuff that comes along with that, and everyone knows that.
right.
So like if you're a head case but you can hoop, people will deal with it. So you sometimes you have guys that their egos are way up here and their game doesn't match it. And so if it doesn't match it, then do people want to deal with that or put up with it? And a lot of times they don't.
Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Advantage podcast. This week, we are gifted with the presence of James Williams the fourth, I believe it is, but I'll let him clarify that because, we got to find out about these other three James. Also, he is the owner and founder of Between the Lines Sports, and he does scouting and media outlet. But there's more that James does. He's also a dad, a proud girl
Yes.
dad, another
Yes.
girl dad. But
Yes.
there's
Yes.
so much more to James, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. How you doing, James?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah. So James Williams, the fourth is the fourth. I go by IV for the fourth sometimes. Um, Founder and owner of Between the Lines Sports, basketball scouting slash media outlet based in Atlanta. Proud girl dad of a recent high school graduate, and I guess legal adult at 18. So yeah, so those are the big accolades right there. Definitely, definitely.
Little scary, yeah? Like legal adult?
Extremely scary. Extremely scary. For me, for sure, but not for her. I think she's okay,
Right,
but
no, she's probably fine, right?
yeah, I'm terrified. I am
Yeah,
terrified
it's a whole
for sure.
different ball game for
Yes,
sure. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you could join us because this is such a different
no doubt.
place that we've gone before. We've talked mostly to athletes and former athletes. I did have a sports psychologist on, and you're the first person that isn't currently an athlete. Although, well, I guess there were former athletes, but tell me a little bit about how you. I like every superhero has an origin story. I love superheroes and origin stories. So tell me a little bit about how you got started in scouting and maybe it came out of your own athletic pursuits. Tell us more about that.
So I am a former athlete. I played basketball at a small NAIA school in Dayton, Tennessee, called Bryan College. I wasn't very good though. I just tried really hard. Um, Worked in the NBA for a little while with the Cavs and the Hawks, primarily in basketball operations and grassroots basketball development. And this business came about by chance. It came about by chance.
Hmm.
I got out of the business for a little while and was miserable. I was in sales and I
Oh,
was extremely depressed. Extremely depressed I'll say that candidly. I was very depressed, and I didn't enjoy what I was doing. And so I embarked on trying to get back into the business, and I kept coming across the same question. And the question was like, "What have you been doing lately?" And my
mm,
response was always, "Well, I've been working. You know, I've got adult stuff going on." So I didn't understand the question. I thought it was a weird question. And then one of my buddies, he brought it up. He said, "James, well, they're asking you that question because they want to know what you've been doing in basketball." And
mm,
for me, I didn't. And I was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" I was like, "I have this resume of work experience." And he was like, "They don't really care. They just want to see that you're doing your best to somehow stay connected." And so I embarked on. It was more so just a journey to kind of showcase my basketball acumen first. I wanted to let people know that I knew basketball, and for me, the ideal way to kind of showcase it was to scout. And
mm.
so I started this YouTube series called Call 'Em Up, and it was based on NBA G League players. That was my last stint in the NBA. Where I was exclusive was in the G League with the Cavs G League organization,
Okay.
and so I did about 15 videos on YouTube on 15 players, and of those 15 players, 13 of those guys got called up that season. Uh,
Wow.
and so a G League coach got wind of or came across one of my videos somehow. I still have no idea how he found it because no one was watching my videos. Um, and so and the thing is, I knew people weren't watching it, but it was more so just so I could, if someone asked, I could show them, well, this is what I've been doing.
Right.
But he came across one of my videos and he asked me, he said, "Well, how much would you charge me to do some scouting, some advanced scouting for our team?" And I didn't know because in my mind it wasn't a business. It was
Right.
just more so to kind of show what I could do.
Right.
And we came up with a number. I did a couple of videos for them, and then he was like, "Well, you should probably come to the G League Showcase." And that year in particular, it was in Mississauga, Canada, which is right outside of Toronto.
Oh, wow.
And so I think this was November when he told me about this, and I think the showcase was right after Christmas. So I didn't have a lot of time to kind of put it together.
Yeah.
And I remember pretty much lying to everyone about it. I remember I lied to my family about why I was going to
Yeah.
Toronto. I lied to work while I was going to Toronto for another reason, and got there and pretty much. So even that story is interesting because I got there, I was broke. I think I spent my last bit of money to go. You needed a credential. I didn't get a credential. I bought a ticket.
Oh, wow.
So the best way I could do it, I bought one ticket for the first day, and I bought. And so this was like a round robin, like AAU kind of event. So like, every 2 hours a new game starts, and people buy tickets for every game separately.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so what I did was I used to always dress in a suit and tie when I would go out, no matter where. Like Vegas in the summer, Toronto in the winter, I had a suit and tie on because
Wow.
I wanted to stand out. And so I wore a suit and tie, bought my floor seat, I sat down, I didn't move. I didn't move the entire day, and halfway through the day, a different coach came and sat next to me. I didn't know who he was. I had never met him before. And when I watch basketball, I talk to myself. So I kind of talk the game, like,
Yeah.
oh, you shouldn't have done that, or get over that screen, whatever the case may be.
Right.
And we just started talking basketball. And halfway through the conversation, he asked me who I worked for, and I just told him nobody. I told him I was there trying to get a job.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know this. And crazy thing, I talked to him on Clubhouse maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, just by chance we end up in the same room.
Yeah.
And I told him how much that question meant to me, because in his mind, I took it as he thought I was good enough to work for someone,
Right.
based on how we were having a conversation. And so that was kind of the embark, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I kept going to events, and I kept meeting new people, and the business expanded. And now, almost 5 years later, I've got 30 interns working for me in all different kind of departments, and it's a full-fledged business, LLC, all the whole deal. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. So many things that you just highlighted in that bit. One, right? Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So one, you bought the ticket. You were broke. You said,
Yeah.
well, whatever, come hell or high water, I'm going to be there. Someone told me to
Yep.
go there. I'm going to go there. And, just you being knowledgeable on what you are, what you had basically trained in your whole life, as far as,
Right.
becoming a fan of basketball, a player of basketball, and then equally a student of the game, right? And the process and the business of the game. You just from doing that, like being in the right place at the right time, just sets you up. I don't believe in chance. I believe that everything happens for a reason, but I understand, like, it kind of seems like that's dumb luck. Like that just happened. But I'm like, that guy finding your YouTube video, everything. Like, first of all, can we still watch those videos? Are they still alive? Can we go?
They are still.
Okay. All right.
So they are way down at the bottom of the YouTube page now, but they are still there for sure.
All right. So if anybody wants to find call him up, James's beginnings, you can see where he was, and you can also see where those players are maybe now, and that would be really awesome. You should probably start that again. I don't know. It sounds like a good series.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I've thought about it. The issue was just the time constraints.
Yes, I know, the editing and the shooting, and oh my gosh, yes. I totally understand.
That was a lot. That was a lot for sure.
All right. So now that we know how you got started, let's talk a little bit about what that process is. So, of course, it's one thing for me to watch a game and be like, oh, they shouldn't have drafted that guy, or, being what they call an armchair quarterback, or, a couch I don't know what they call it, couch coach, or whatever they call it. But what goes into scouting? Tell us a little bit about the background of that, and then what you bring to it, or what you're looking for. Because in case there's any parents or coaches or anyone looking to work with you, like, what is that whole process about?
So at its most organic basis, it's evaluating talent. So identifying if someone can play or not. and at what level those players can play. So that's the first thing. But honestly, any Joe Schmo can do that part. Anybody, like if you see somebody can play, pretty much most people can identify someone who can play. The tough part is probably identifying level that they can play at, and then there's a deeper level of it, which comes to what kind of person are they? Are they a team player? Can they play on this team? Can they thrive in this system? Um, and that's high school, college kind of thing, and also the NBA. And
Okay.
then from there, like on the professional level, it's what would they do if we give them $10 million? What kind of drive do they have? What motivates them? What
How
gets
can you
them
tell that? I'm sorry to interrupt, but how can you tell that if
um,
you're just watching me in a game, well,
yeah,
maybe you're doing more than that and you're going to say, but how can
yeah.
you tell if you give me $10 million what I'm going to do with it?
There's definitely more. So there's definitely a
Okay.
lot more research. It's what they call intel. So
Okay.
you gather intel. Um, character is key. The kind of person that you are is probably the most important aspect of it. You hear all these like terms like this is a person I want to go to war with, or I would want to be in a foxhole with, or whatever the case may be. Um, you want equally good players and good people.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is there's a flip side too, because everyone doesn't care about character. And so the other side of that is um, the better you are, in theory, the less your character has to be, because your character has the character. Excuse my language, but the character has to match your bullshit. So if like, or the
Mm,
game has to match your bullshit rather. So if you are a really really good player, there's some ego and other stuff that comes along with that, and everyone knows that.
right.
So like if you're a head case but you can hoop, people will deal with it. So you sometimes you have guys that their egos are way up here and their game doesn't match it. And so if it doesn't match it, then do people want to deal with that or put up with it? And a lot of times they don't.
Gotcha.
Um, and now there's such an abundance of players everywhere too that they can find a replacement who won't say anything. They'll be a good teammate, and that's what people want. Like, because the last thing you want is for your seventh or eighth best player to be the head case on your team.
Mm,
So you don't want that, and you don't want a bunch of those guys either. So you almost want to kind of balance it out. You want to have more good quality people on your team, because everyone has their issues and everyone has their problems. I'm sure Um, so you want to kind of balance it out and make sure that it doesn't be a detriment to the team, so to speak. And so I look at all those things. So outside of you can play, I try to find out what kind of person you are. Like, if you can fit in this system, can he fit in a system that has a group of guys who are married and have families? Is he going to fit in with those guys, or does he need to be around a group of younger people who he can kind of relate to, or would he thrive with more adult supervision, so to speak? So there's so many different variables of things. It's harder, as the younger they are, the harder it is, because you're trying to predict what someone's going to become,
yeah.
which is difficult. The thing that I try to do is I try not to put the younger people in a box. So whatever, I typically try not to evaluate under the age of 15, only because it's just so hard, and then
Right.
the basketball really not that great either, to be
Right.
honest. Um, so I try my best to evaluate the like upperclassmen, high school players, and so on and so on. But I don't
Yeah.
put kids in boxes. I'm just more matter of fact about what I see, and then the more I get to know players, and then I do a lot of watching from afar. So I'm not the person that there's scouts who are very like boisterous and outgoing, and they make themselves known in the gym.
Yeah.
I'd rather go into the gym with my laptop, do my work, and not speak to anybody. And not because I'm antisocial, just because I can do a better job of evaluating the player, the parents, how they interact with their teammates, all that stuff, if I'm not really socializing with other people. So that's kind of where I try to find my sweet spot. But of course, there's the networking that goes involved. But
Yeah,
I
of
do my
course.
and,
So, well, that was where I was going to go, kind of what you were saying, because I wanted to know, do you, because I know there's restrictions, right? Coaches can't
right.
recruit certain players based on certain rules with the NCAA and,
Mhm.
All of that. When you are in that situation, because you're now, if you were contracted by the team, are you bound by the same rules? Or are you not, because you're an independent agency and you can go up to, like, Mikey Williams right now, and you can talk to him even if you're not at college, you don't
Yeah.
have to do the whole from afar, even though that's your preference.
Right. I have complete autonomy to talk to anybody pretty much.
Okay.
Unless like so sometimes events will say, hey, don't talk to the kids. That's different. But for the most
Right.
part, that's kind of why the business actually exists, because there are a lot of people who do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It exists for the reason that coaches only have certain times of the year where they can actually talk to players, and so we're the middlemen, so to speak. So we're allowed to go talk to players, talk to parents, find out about grades, or just whatever the case may be, what they're doing, what their extracurriculars are, just to find out about them. So, after games, I'll talk to players sometimes, just whether it's simply just trying to get some information, like getting a phone number or a social media tag or something, or, what are your grades like? Have you taken the
Mm-hmm.
SAT yet? Where's your mom? Where's your dad? Let me go talk to them, kind of thing. So I live in that area where I can do a lot more for coaches, and I think that's why they probably subscribe to the service more often than not.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And so it's a subscription service
Mm-hmm.
that we can subscribe to, or we can independently contract you on a certain case basis. Like, I want information on this guy.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the other question I had was, obviously this podcast is called The Mental Advantage. We're
Right.
very, considerate of the mental game. What aspect do you find for the mental game, and how are you measuring that? Or what do you find helpful as indicators of that?
The ability to handle adversity is my key indicator always, because it's the one thing that adversity will always happen. Whether it happens often or not, it will always happen, and how someone handles it, or I guess adjusts to it in the moment, is a key factor in what they could be, I believe. Um, right now, I have a thought process. This has been my thought process since I kind of started this, is that older players in college typically adjust to the NBA at a much quicker pace, because they've had moments of adversity on a consistent basis. So if you have a guy who's a one and done kid, who's who's just 1 year out of high school, he's in the NBA, and you take a 4 year college player and you measure them up side by side, the younger player may have more physical potential or more star potential, as they say. But I typically find the older player has gone through stages in his college career, and because he has, and those stages are typically just simply at first it's, I want to play. So how do I get on the court to play? So you're fighting with, maybe there's an upperclassman on the team that plays my position. How do I take some of his minutes so I can play? And then how do
Mm.
I, the next year, maybe how do I establish a role on the team overall, as opposed to just wanting to play? How do I establish whatever my role is? And maybe in the third year and the fourth year, you become more of a primary focal point on the team. So that guy has gone through so many different levels of adversity that by the time he's a senior, he has overcome so many obstacles that when you go to the NBA, more often than not, you're a role player. And so
Mm.
that guy can walk into that team as a role player immediately and just fit, as opposed to a lot of the younger players, they've always kind of been the guy. And
Mm.
so there's not a lot of adversity when you're the guy, because you have less restrictions on what you can and can't do. You have no one's going to challenge who you are, because you're typically better than everyone else. So because of that, those guys it's probably the first time they face major adversity is when they get to the NBA, because you're not the primary person on the team. You can't shoot the ball whenever you want to. You can't talk back to the coach. You don't have full autonomy to just run the team how you want to. And then those guys typically struggle a lot more because of that, especially late these past like 5 or 10 years or so.
Yeah.
There's just a supreme struggle, and it takes them a lot of times 3 or 4 years to kind of adjust, which is in theory those 3 or 4 years they would have been in college, right? And
Mm.
so the ability to handle adversity, whether it's a loss or a position being taken or time not being given to you, all those things matter to me. And so, whether it's on the court, and then sometimes, like when you do your intel, what kind of adversity have you been through off the court, and
Mm.
how have you come that? Are you a big brother or a big sister? Do you take care of your siblings? um, are you in a one parent, two parent home? Do you have responsibilities outside of playing basketball? And so if everything's kind of been handed to you and laid out on a silver platter, more often than not, a struggle is going to come at some point. And do you want the struggle to come after you give them $10 million?
Yeah.
Like what happens when you get hit in the face? It's like a boxer. Like everybody's fine until you get hit in the face the first time. And
Yeah.
so how do you adjust to that? And so for me, my indicator is always just how do you handle adversity? How do you handle adversity that you cannot control? Period. Like there's something that's gonna go
Yeah.
not gonna go your way. How do you deal with that? What do you do to overcome it? What's your demeanor, your mentality like as a person, as a player by yourself, and then
Yeah.
with your teammates? All those things matter to me.
Okay. All right. So, how you handle adversity. So, what came to me one was, James, are you advocating for all high school basketball players to finish college? I just want to know. I'm getting you on record.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Okay. Okay.
No, I'm not. I am. I'm also a firm believer. If you can hoop, you can hoop.
You
And
can hope. You
so,
can hope. Okay.
yeah. And so, if you and I believe that no matter what, if you have the skill set for the job, you should be able to have the job.
You should be able to have the job. Okay. So when I noticed I say so a lot, so I'm just gonna put that in
You're
there
okay.
because I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, when
I
I'm
say
editing.
I say like a lot, so
Yeah.
it's
When I'm editing these, like that's yeah, anyway. Uh the big thing that I'm hearing from that, right, is adversity. So but the first thought that came to me was like a LaMelo Ball, for
mm,
example. Did you have anything to do with him? Did you scout him, even if, because I'm sure you do it independently, because you can't turn it off. Like you're
right.
doing it, even if you're
Yeah,
not doing it. So, what are
yeah.
your thoughts about like a LaMelo Ball, or even now some of these AAU guys getting these huge followings? The
Hmm.
Mikey Williams, like, everybody's talking about him since they're 14. I mean,
Right.
Bronny James, like, what are your thoughts about that? And what do you think that a player like a LaMelo Ball, like a Marvin Bagley, Cam Reddish can do if they are a one and done,
Mm,
to be able to create that in an, I guess, inorganic way, if that makes
mm,
sense, or
yeah.
to be able to sort of, if they're not having that adversity off the court.
Right. I think it's probably more so on the adults in the situation to somehow manufacture it.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think based on what I did scout Lamelo when he came back from Lithuania. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't scout him before. I mean, I
Okay.
saw him, of course, because the whole team was a YouTube, internet sensation. So
Yeah.
I knew about him, but I had never scouted him before.
Okay.
But when he came back and played at Spire in Ohio, I did scout him then. Um, I think he overcame a lot of adversity in the sense of, and again, it's different because you get pulled from high school, you're taken to Lithuania to play
Right.
basketball. You're 2 years younger than your older brother, not
Right.
the oldest, but the older brother. So and so you're with him. You got so much attention on you, whether it's a TV camera in your face all the time, or again, people following you and wanting a piece of you. I
Yeah.
think that's a level of adversity that a lot of kids don't face. Again,
Yeah.
now some people could say that it's self inflicted because it was the family created this train pretty much. And
Yeah.
so now you got to keep the train going, and so that's one thing. But even I heard stories about like some teams not wanting to play him when he came back, because hey, well he's a pro now. Like I don't want to play against a professional against I got high school
Right.
kids. People questioning his character or what kind of person is he. You may see the show and watch him, and you may forget that he was 15 or 16 when the show was out, and
Yeah.
like what were you like when you were 15 or 16? And, people may want to hold you to a higher standard because of like he said something stupid, but like
Right.
what 16-year-old doesn't say anything stupid?
Right. Thank God there weren't cameras when we were.
Seriously,
Yeah.
seriously. And so, but I think to go back to your question, I think it has to do with more so the parents and the coaches to create some adversity. And I think the downside to it is, as parents, even I'm victim of this. I fall victim of this. Like I want to make it as easy as possible for my kid to get to wherever they want to get to.
Right.
And then the coaches, to be honest, a lot of them aren't. They're volunteers on
Mm-hmm.
the not the high school side, but more the AAU side, the travel ball
Yeah.
side. And so they may not know how to create that adversity so the kid can overcome it, and
Yeah.
then to be sure that the kid would do it properly when they do it. So like playing that mental game with them and giving them situations that how do you do this, and are you giving them like real world circumstances that will
Yeah.
cause them to think about stuff, and how will I react to this if this happens. And so I put the blame more, not even the blame, I put the pressure more so on the adults in the situation
Yeah.
to try to create some adversity, because at the end of the day, while we all want our kids to thrive and be successful, you have to allow them to, at least in my, I believe this wholeheartedly. I think that the reason why I'm the person I am is because I dealt with a lot of stuff as a kid and I was able to overcome it. So like now I
Yeah.
just say I roll with the punches. Whatever happens, I may be upset for a moment or two, but at the end of the day, I have to keep moving. So you just kind of roll with it. And
Yeah.
I think I have those kind of people who can just roll with whatever happens, because you'll see some stuff, especially AAU high school stuff. Kids will throw tantrums. If something doesn't go the exact way they think it should go, there is, I don't want to play, or I don't like this, or even practices. I don't want to practice today. I
Yeah.
never missed a practice in my life, my
I
entire
know.
life. From 8 years old, when I first started playing any sport, I never missed a practice in my life, no matter what it was.
Right.
I mean, never. And so, like, now you hear kids like, "Oh, I couldn't make it today." What do you mean you couldn't make it? I
Right.
mean, things like that. Like there's a lot more like freedom to and flexibility to just kind of do what you want. And I think that's because we want to make it. Well, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go.
Yeah.
My mom used to tell me, if you start it, you're going to finish it. That was her line. So if,
Right.
if you're going to sign up for this football team or this baseball team, this basketball team, you're committed to it until it's done. You can't
Right.
quit in the middle of the season if you don't like it. And then on the other side for me, I had older brothers too. So
Yeah.
I was picked on and beat up on by my older brothers to the point where like I think they toughened me up too, and that helped a lot also. So I mean, there's so many different factors and variables that can go into it, but manufacturing some adversity for kids who may not have as much, I think is huge for the adjustment whenever they get to college and or the professional ranks.
Absolutely. And as I'm recalling, because I had Marvin Bagley on my
Yeah.
podcast, it hasn't come out yet, but it will be coming by the time this airs, it will have
Okay.
dropped. What I also recognize with a player of that magnitude, these one and done players, these high profile players, is there's a level of adversity that even we can't comprehend, like because of what goes along with all of that. Everybody wants a piece, everybody's trying to get at them. So while maybe they're not, not to say that all the one and dones are in this category, but maybe their family isn't struggling financially or isn't going through the turmoil that you see of the sort of rags to riches stories.
Mhm.
Yet there's definitely a level of pressure that is unfathomable for those of us that haven't experienced that in some ways. Wouldn't you
I
say?
would agree. I would agree 100% because, like you said, there are more people trying to hang on or trying to get access, um, trying to get an interview. Like you'd be surprised. Like you go to some of these events and you see adults chasing after kids, and
Yeah.
like like as a kid, like I can imagine like having a 30-something-year-old man running behind me trying to talk to me for a second.
Yeah.
I can't fathom that. And
Right.
so I can only imagine, or just meeting somebody randomly and wondering if they know who I am and if they want something from me, if they're trying to get something from me or get access to me for some reason. So yeah, I think there's definitely a level that most people can't. And again, like Zion and
Mm-hmm.
LaMelo are probably like really unique cases because they had like massive followings, millions of followers on social
Yeah.
media. People like people know who you are wherever you go
Right.
already. And so there's a level of fame that they probably wouldn't have had if they were a regular high school student,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so how do you deal with that? There's a huge difference between being popular at your school and being popular in the world just as a
Yes.
whole. And so
Yeah.
how do you handle that popularity on that magnitude where people are always trying to get to you? And I can't even imagine what that's like. And again, like for you, like you said, that's definitely a level of adversity that you have to somehow figure out how to overcome for sure.
Right, because you can totally mismanage that in a way that can be really bad for your draft stock or your, any
For
of
sure.
that.
For
Um,
sure.
so that's really good though for us to keep into perspective, right? Because there's a lot of different facets that each athlete in their own individual right is faced with. So the
Right.
questions that come to me when it comes to, all right, so we're evaluating their mental game, we're looking at their overall stuff, their ego, their attitude, how they handle things. Obviously their playing acumen, not just on the field, but off the field, off the court.
Mhm.
And then as well as their ability to understand the game, right? Like understanding the game. Have you had an athlete that you were like you was good, but you were like, I don't, I don't want names. That's
Mhm.
not what this is about. But like that,
Right.
you were like, I don't know if I want this kid to go, all the way, or or the team is really excited about him, but you're kind of like, yeah, I just
Yeah,
don't think he's the guy. So, yeah, tell us
for
about any of,
sure.
yeah.
For sure. So this year in particular, so the cool thing about my job now is that I'm actually starting to see kids go from high school to college to the NBA. And so I think this is the second full cycle year that I've had where I've seen a kid from that level all the way up and now draft eligible.
Okay.
And so the cool part about it is that I get not even close familiar. I get very
Right.
familiar with certain players. And so now as teams start to call as the draft approaches and they're saying, "Oh, well, why is this happening to him? Or why is that happening to him?" Or and one kid in particular, that I told him flat out, the kid's never had any adversity in his life. And that's for me. I knew that personally because I had
Right.
been close to him and been close to being just close into watching his situation and knowing about his situation.
Right.
There was nothing that had been a struggle for him ever. And so this past year was the first time he ever had any hiccup. COVID. I mean, and then COVID was hit everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
So
Right.
so obviously there's a level that like you can't control what happened, why it happened. And then your team maybe doesn't play as well as you're used to playing because you maybe played on a bunch of really good teams your entire life. So you've always kind of won. You lose a game here or there, but you pretty much win all the time. And now people are scrutinizing your play to the point where it may affect your draft stock and what you thought that you would be. Where maybe you thought you were going to be a lottery pick. And now maybe you're out of the first round. You just never know. And so how do you deal with that kind of adversity? And so I had people call, I had NBA teams call me about this particular player, and I was like, well, this is how he is. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, certain things like, oh, why is he shooting it well? I was like, well, honestly, he's never really been able to shoot. You
Right.
guys have seen highlights. You haven't seen him play. And so
Got
you
it.
don't know. And so now your first time seeing him play, you're realizing that it's not that smooth stroke you thought it was, that it's streaky, or,
Mm.
he's not handling losing very well, whatever the case may be. How do you, and so you be honest with them and tell the truth. My whole thing is always tell the truth. I never try to sugarcoat anything about a player, about their skill set, because I don't have skin in the race, as they say. I have no
Right.
skin in the race. I'm not invested outside of my time, which is given to a bunch of kids, and they most of the time kids don't even know it. So there's no skin in the race. So I just try to tell the truth. And for me, that goes back to my credibility as an evaluator. I want to make sure that people understand that I'm being truthful, whether they agree with my opinion or not. It's the one that I've kind of formulated over the course of these years. But yeah, like, hey, I don't know if that's going to work. Or I don't think personally he's a first round pick. I'll say
Right.
something like, I think he's an NBA player, but maybe he's not a first round pick. So, oh, you don't think he's a first round pick? I don't think so. I mean, somebody may draft him, but
Yeah.
that doesn't change the fact that maybe they were wrong. And
Right.
so, I feel I had a conversation 2 days ago with a buddy of mine, and we were talking about a particular player in this year's draft,
Yeah.
and he said, "Oh, well, he's a first rounder," and I'm like, "No, he's not." And he's like, "Where are you getting your information from?" I was like, "He's not a first round. He's not a first." I was like, "Now he may get drafted first round, but he's not a
Right.
first round pick." And
Got
he's like,
it.
"And how do you know? How do you know?" And I just kind of lay out the things that I know and what I've seen.
Right.
Again, not saying that I'm 100% right, but
Right.
in my opinion, I wouldn't draft him in the first round. And you can think about whatever you want to, but that's
Right.
kind of the thing. Like you see them, see how they act, how they move, how their circle is, all these different variables. And again, like I go back to the money all the time, but do I want to give him $10 million?
Got
And
it.
not do I want to. Well, what will he do with it? Does it motivate him, or does he become complacent? Is he good enough for that money in the first place, or could he provide more value at a lesser number? And so all those things kind of matter when you're making that decision, and a lot of that comes from what you see from them when they're young.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Are
so
you saying that based on what you just said, are you saying that if I give him less money, he may perform better?
yeah,
Wow.
so
Okay.
I call these guys value picks.
Okay.
And first round in the NBA, first round draft picks, their money's guaranteed from number 1 to number 30. Whatever, and it's slotted money. So whatever you get drafted, that money's just there.
Okay.
Um, and so,
Well, tell us how much. If I get a first round
uh,
draft pick, what do I
so
get?
if,
What am I
so
getting?
so if you're the number 1 pick, you're slated to make around $40 million in your first contract.
Okay.
So it's 4 years, so about $10 million per contract,
Okay.
and it drops down
The later I go
Straight-
in the draft,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so the second round is all contract negotiation. So whatever your agent can negotiate, but it's typically a lot less.
Okay.
Now you may have some second rounders get first round money, so maybe they sign a 2-year deal that's similar to what maybe the 20th pick gets, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. But so case in point, let's say I know a kid that he's a tweener. He may, and I say tweeners are typically from 20 to 40. All
Okay.
those guys can switch, in my opinion. Like any
Okay.
of those guys can go they can go from 40 to 20, or 20 to 40, and somewhere in between they can just go.
And you mean the picks, not the money?
Not the the
Okay.
picks.
Gotcha.
And so if I can get a player later and pay him less, and I think he's a quality player, typically he provides more value because he's cheaper to you. He's cheaper to your books.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you
cheaper
weren't
to you.
talking about like a money ceiling. You weren't saying that he's going to
Yeah.
play less because he's getting paid too much. You're talking about what? Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
what value he can bring to, so he, in theory, he can bring more value because you got him at a
You got him
cheaper
at a
level.
discount, right?
Yeah, pretty much, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now on the other hand, there are certain cases where somebody gets drafted high and then the motivation to get there it shrinks dramatically, and then they don't perform well because maybe the goal was to get drafted and to make it to the NBA. And so like some people, like they get there and then like they forget that now you have to the goal is to stay there. It's not just to get there, it's to stay. So however you get there is one thing, but to stay there and sustain that success for us a number of years is where the real money comes into play on that side.
Okay.
And so you find a lot of guys that are drafted very, very high, and you'll look up and they're out of the league in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so you get one contract. And so why did that happen? Where you probably drafted, maybe if you were drafted later and you had a chip on your shoulder to say, well, maybe you shouldn't have skipped me earlier. Maybe I would have played better, as opposed to saying, oh, well, I knew I was a number one pick. I got drafted number one. This is where I'm supposed to be. And now I'm supposed to, again, that goes back to the adversity we talked about earlier. Like everything's kind of come where I thought it should be. And now that how do I handle this? Like, do I play hard? Do I try hard? Do I work out in the off season? Do I eat right? Do I take care of my body? Do I, not party, 7 days a week until 3 a.m., whatever the case may be. And so all those things matter. And you never know what kind of person you're getting until you get them. Unfortunately, there's no science to it. It's just, it's really just a guess. It really is.
Yeah. So, okay. There is some science that suggests that the higher the athlete's paid, the less motivated they are. Interestingly enough, kind of to go to what you were talking about. So it's like, I've reached this pinnacle, and also almost like the pressure that comes with it. Maybe it's a back down on their part, right? Like, so it's not so much that they're intentionally like, okay, you're paying me $50 million. I don't care. It's not that, but I think there's a level of something inside of a person that, it's kind of like, okay, whoa, right? Where, and we just look at it, right? People say all the time, oh my God, I like watching college basketball because they work their butts off. They play harder because they're not being paid. Now that we have the name, image and likeness coming and all that, which we can talk about that in a second. Of course, who knows if that's going to change, but it is very good to know that, things to look at, right? Because you want to find out, like, am I getting a value for that? Not just what they're getting paid, but are they putting out the work?
Yep.
Have you ever been pleasantly surprised that you were wrong, or are you pretty bang on most of the time? And I'm sure you're happy to be wrong because you're never betting against a player.
Correct.
But tell me a little bit, have you ever had a situation where you were like, I read that all the way wrong, or he just surprised me. He just came out of nowhere and kind of did what I thought he wouldn't do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if you're an evaluator, you're always going to be, you're always going to be wrong at some point, because somebody's going to prove you wrong, or somebody's going to prove you right. I mean, or you'll be wrong and you'll say less and they'll be do more, or you'll think highly and they won't perform as
right.
Well. And so it happens every year. I mean, honestly, every year there's a player that I'm thinking like, oh, that kid, I think he's going to be good. And then again, whatever the circumstances are, because you can't control circumstances, like something changes. But yeah, I mean, case in point, I'll say his name because he plays for my hometown team, the Atlanta Hawks. I wasn't high on Trae Young. I wasn't. But Trae Young I didn't think that he couldn't play. I just didn't think that he would be this good so soon. And he is, oh wow, he's He's superseded what I thought could happen. But then the crazy thing is, when I was in Vegas last week, another scout was telling me about it. He said, well, a lot of this is the change to the rules. Like you look at him, you see he's small, and how's he gonna handle the pounding that he's gonna take in the NBA.
Yeah.
He's like, well, the rules changed. You can't touch him. And so you
Yeah.
think, and like those things, like, and you're not, and maybe I have like a 90s, early 2000s mentality about the game. And so like I think, well, you can't put your hands on him. And so
Right.
now this guy has he has wiggle room to do whatever he wants to do.
Right.
And you can't lay a finger on him. And so now, do I think, when I go back and say, well, maybe he wouldn't survive in an earlier generation?
Yeah.
I could say that, but at the same time, if he's as good as he is, maybe he adjusts.
Yeah.
And the other side, I kind of, me being I was a small point guard. I've always been, and so like people, oh, he's so small. He's always been small.
Yeah.
So
it's never changed. Right.
He's probably more likely to adjust to the size and physicality more than somebody who's bigger and maybe has been the biggest person on the court, as opposed to the opposite, because he's always been the smallest person on the court. So maybe he has the easier adjustment, which again, that's the adversity too, that maybe because he's always been that small guy, he knows how to adjust to whatever it is. And maybe as it gets harder and stronger, there's a different level of adjustment, but he knows that he could do it, as opposed to, I'm the biggest dude in the gym. Like, I've never seen anybody my size ever in my life. And then now I walk into a gym and everybody's my same size. Like, how do I function as now I'm normal? When you're small, you're not like, you're always small. And so now you factor in that, like he probably had an easier adjustment than somebody else, because he knows who he is already. And I think, as a small person, you always know who you are on the court. And so you know what people are going to say about you. Oh, he's too this, he's too that. He can't do this, he can't do that. And a lot of times you kind of carry that on your shoulder, and you just, I was a little tyrant personally. I was feisty. I talked hella, you know what?
Yes.
I didn't back down from anybody. And so I was I was probably more aggressive than most, because I felt like I had to be, because I knew when people saw me, they saw weakness.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to let that, dictate how I played in my game. And so maybe that's what Trae did. And so when I say pleasantly surprised, I root for him, and I'm happy that he's, taking the league by storm, so to speak, now. So
it's such a good point, because there's so many athletes out there that sort of, like they get so lost in this idea that, oh, I'm not naturally the height, the whatever, if we were to build the perfect basketball player, football player, you name the sport, it's like, oh, I don't fit that. But because of that, you have an advantage. It's called the underdog advantage. We talked about it in a different episode with a guy that walked on to the NFL. I mean, basically, his name's Greg Camarillo. But in general, because you have to work harder. You're having to become, like you said, more scrappy, more inventive, right? So maybe he would adapt to the bad boys of Detroit, right? With the Bash Brothers or whatever they were called. I don't know. But he would have made he would have probably, but it doesn't really matter. These are all great conversations for us to have, like, this team versus that team, this guy being the great versus, LeBron, Jordan, Kobe, all that.
Right.
But I think it's really good to, like, for athletes that are listening, or parents of athletes, is like, use that to your advantage, because the shorter or smaller that you are, the more nimble you are, the more, they're always talking about big guys can't be fast, even though Shaq kind of, was a fast big guy, or at least had a lot more nimbleness than most big guys come with.
Right.
And I think Zion and what's his name? Giannis is like that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Don't quote
me.
No,
you're right.
Okay.
You're right.
So I think it's really important that we look at that and we say, okay, what do I have that I can work with versus what I don't have? And I think that's a really big thing for basketball players to keep in mind.
Yeah. For sure. I think there's another thing. A lot of, as evaluators in particular, we're always talking about what someone can't do.
Yeah.
Like, well, he can't do this, well, he doesn't have this, or he's not this.
Yeah.
As opposed to identifying, what does he do well?
Right.
What are his skill sets? What are the talents that makes him unique? And can we use those talents to better our team? I feel like that's on an athletic team or a team in general. Like, if I'm building a case in point, I have all these interns with me. Am I trying to put you in a box, or am I trying to figure out what your skill sets are so that you can better help us. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm looking for one thing, but if you're skilled in this other area and I can find a way to utilize that, how much better am I as a leader to identify how good you are and if you can help us. And
Mm.
so often, you'll hear it. Honestly, you'll watch the draft. You'll hear all the things that
Oh
someone
yeah.
can't, all the things he can't do. But he's not this. He's too small. He's not long. He's not fast. He's not athletic. But can he play?
Yeah.
I want people who can play.
Right.
Like in business, I want people who know their shit. Like so if you're a great marketer, I want you to go kick ass in marketing. If you're a
Yeah.
great publicist, go kick ass in publishing. If you're, I'm not gonna put you over. If you're a marketer, I'm not gonna put you in sales, or
Right.
I'm not gonna put you in IT if you do something else. Let me be who I am, and let me fill my role. And if I can fill my role, then we win as a team. And so I feel so often that we put people in boxes and we want them to fit this like you said, this perfect mold of what a player is or what a teammate is or whatever, whoever, and you can't. I
Yeah.
mean, I think like you said, like him being small is a plus for him because he's
Yep.
always been. You're not gonna. There's no adjustment.
Yep.
I've been busting your ass since I was 12, and I've been tiny. So
Yep.
excuse my language. Sorry, but I don't know if I can curse.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. I do that sometimes, but
It's just locker room talk.
right, pretty much, pretty much, pretty much. But if I've been killing you since I was this age, more often than not, and I've had to overcome whatever my shortcomings were.
Right.
It may continue.
Absolutely.
So that kind of stuff. So
I think it also
um,
helps Trae that there wasn't a real standout star on the Hawks. So he's kind of been, at least I don't think so. I
it
gotta
wasn't. Yeah.
say, yeah, exactly. So he kind of had to, like, he had the
Hmm.
opportunity. He had the perfect environment. On another team, maybe Trae Young doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
so, that's a really great thing. And to go back to something you said earlier that I wanted to ask you about, how do you become familiar with the culture of the teams that you're talking about? Because, like, obviously we know some guys in the NBA are married, some guys are single, all that. But when you're talking about team culture, I know you come
Hmm.
from that world, but are you getting your intel like firsthand from the organization? Because I don't know how they're going to tell you the truth, so to speak, if that makes sense. Or are
Yeah.
you got other people that you talk to, or are you actually somehow around the culture enough to know it? How do you get that information?
It's probably a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Like teams
Yeah.
aren't going to give you like, the intricate details of the team by any
Right.
stretch.
Right.
Um, So one thing you have to really be a good evaluator of people, and not even just like so just knowing about people. Luckily the good part is being in the circle. Just you get a lot of information just from small talk,
Yeah.
and you find out what kind of person someone is. And people will tell you a lot if you just ask, and not but without being intrusive is probably the way I like to say it. So
Yeah.
I may not ask. I may not even know I'm asking the question that may help me, and I'm not even. And a lot of times I'm not even fishing for information. I may just say, well, how is it that when he got on the team, there's another point guard there. How do you handle that? And you just
Right.
kind of find out little nuggets here and there, and then it's like putting the puzzle pieces together and
Got
figuring out
it.
what kind of people. Or luckily I do have the ability to kind of cross paths with people from time to time, and you just and you don't know everything. Obviously, I can't know a person's the ins and outs of a person,
Right.
but based on my interactions, I can say, well, he seems like a good person, or he may be a jerk, or like whatever, because you get all that stuff. You get
Yeah.
all of it. You get the good, you get the bad, and so whether it's well, he played the same position as this guy. This guy's probably not gonna. This guy's probably gonna be threatened that this guy's coming in, and how will the kid coming in handle it? How will the veteran there handle it? And is there going to be a clash? Is there going to be some sort of issue there, or do you see player X having fundraisers to support some charity, or do you see player Y, flashing jewelry and girls on their stuff, and you never know. And again,
Gotcha.
all those people can be doing other things off the camera that you may not
Right.
know,
Right.
but just piecing together what you can come up with to better determine what something whether something may be a fit or not.
Okay. All right. I love that you said earlier, and I wish I had said it then, but that you talked about talking about what players can't do. And so, because I do feel like we limit people, we do try to put them in a box, like you said, and finding out where they're best fitted. And then you spoke earlier about parents, sort of like in the adults around the athlete. How do you believe that, or what advice, let me say this, because you do interact with all of these people all the time. And while you are evaluating them, do you get into like, here's some advice on how to improve his draft stock? Because at that point, you're just taking intel. You're not necessarily like, like I said, you have no skin in the race.
Right.
How are you helping, or what advice do you have for these individuals to help them not be put in a box or not be focused on what they can't do, or help the parents sort of, bolster the athlete properly?
So to be honest, the more high profile players, I don't get questions a lot because it's kind of, there's probably a smaller circle, a more tight knit circle, or so there's maybe a level of arrogance that we're fine. We don't need your help. Because and even with me, like the better players, I don't necessarily evaluate that much because, Zion Williams didn't need to be scouted by me.
Right, exactly. No one needs to sell him. Right.
Right. So the cool thing is probably more so for the guys that are not necessarily under the radar, but less known players. Those guys would be more, their parents may be more inclined to ask, or the player may be more inclined to ask, hey, what do you think I need to work on? Or what do you think I can do better? The thing is, I feel like all players should see my scouting reports on them. The thing is they don't. So while I'm evaluating,
can they ask for it?
Sometimes they do. I've had some, but they can always ask.
Well, do you provide it? I mean, like if they,
I probably more so I would give them an overall evaluation as opposed to showing them the actual report.
Right.
I would tell them what I thought.
And
a lot of times I do that. And the players I probably have closer relationships with, I talk to them more frequently because I feel like there's a relationship that I can share. There's also a level of sensitivity that you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Right. And so now if someone flat out, hey James, what do you think I need to work on? I'll say, hey, well, you need to work on your ball handling. You're very weak going to your left. Your pull up game is pretty predictable. I may say something like that to be honest with them, just so they can work on it. And it's more so as a critique as opposed to a tear down.
Right. Of course.
Now, right. And then so on the college level, there's a lot of that. So I'll be candid with players who may be aware of me, because a lot of in the college space, I'm definitely more so in the cut or the background, so to speak. So a lot of people, and I like that. But anyways, but if players know me and know about me and they see that I'm at their game, hey, what you think? I'll tell them. Yeah. Because I think what happens too often is, and I found this out, and first of all, Moneyball is one of my favorite books. My favorite movies. I love it. And I read the book. And I read the book. I read the book once a year now. I think I've read it like 5 years in a row, at least once. And there's a part in the book where Billy Beane talks. There's a scout talking to Billy Beane about things that he didn't do well when he was a teenager, and Billy was so angry in the book because he was like, "Why didn't anybody tell me this? I could have, I could have been there. I could have worked on that." And so it's almost unfair to have this information and it not be shared with the player, because the player is the one that's going to be affected by it the most. So if I can provide that information and it's taken and received well, by all means I will, because at the end of the day, I want everyone to make it to where they're going to make it to, and everyone to achieve whatever their goals are. And if I can help you achieve your goal, that's the whole point of my business, is to help people. So if I can help you achieve your goal, I want to help. So I'll definitely share.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I don't think people recognize that, when we're talking about draft Sunday or whenever it happens, draft day, a lot of times, there's so much little rhetoric turned around. I watched a TikTok video that said, yeah, he's a real football player. And the girl was like, aren't they all? Like in the NFL, like that's not really a comment, right? Like he's the guy you want in your locker room. Right. But anyway, but we're talking about people, and they're sitting there, and we're just having this, like people, like the color commentary that happens on all the sports shows, the stuff that happens on the sidelines, all of this, we're talking about these individuals as if we know everything about them. And so I agree. I think it would be really helpful for them to know, because like you said, yeah, why wouldn't you give that information to them so that they could get better, rather than, just kind of like, well, here, I've got a snapshot of who you are. And, I'm not going to really give you that information because I kind of already know where you're going. And I don't want to be right about that. I want you to prove me wrong, right? If it's
Always.
me. Right. And
always.
yeah. Right. And I'm like, and I love that you're saying like, I'm not putting you in a box. I'm not going to limit your upside. I'm going to give you the information. What you do with that information, obviously, is going to be a big determinant of what who you are as a person, obviously. So.
Correct.
I understand that the big guys aren't asking for advice, and that's fine. But if you were to give advice to the parents surrounding these athletes or the coaches, if they were open, what would be the biggest thing that you see that you're like, man, you're missing it every time, or you're coming up against this a lot, and what would your advice be to them?
Well, typically it's probably the aspect of being a really good teammate. Because again, a lot of times the bigger well-known players, they don't have to be, because they're the best player. And so so it's more so, again, it goes back to character. Character comes back up again. What kind of person are you? How are you with your team? Do you encourage them when they're playing well? Do you lift them up? When you're playing bad and you win, are you still okay with it? Because sometimes you'll see guys that, like the team may win and they played horrible and they're upset because they didn't play well.
Right.
Can you be happy for other people and their success?
So
are you a person that someone wants to be in a foxhole with? Do I want to go to battle with you? Are you okay with not being the primary person? And a lot of times, like I said, they have that adjustment period to do so takes a lot longer, because they're just so not used to it that could hinder your progression by itself, because you have to adjust to that first and then you work on your game. And so, can I work on that? So it's the teammate aspect for sure. Is it?
Yeah.
Because like skill set, I mean, it's hard to even evaluate them sometimes, because they're typically the best player at the level they're playing at. So like, how do you really determine how good they are? Because they're better than everyone. So you really won't know until that top level. So it's more so, can you be a really good person in whatever the situation is? Can you be a good teammate when you win? Can you be a good team? Can you be a good teammate when you don't play well? Can you be a good teammate when you lose? Can you listen to coaching? Are you waving your coach off when they're saying something that you don't want to hear? Or are you looking at him in his eye and saying, yes, sir, I understand what you're saying? Are you getting your teammate a towel when they come off that they just had a good run? Whatever the case may be, those things I think matter, because more often than not, you're not going to be a star in the NBA.
Right.
It's just it's a small percentage. I mean, in my opinion, there may be 5 superstars in the league.
Yeah.
And then everyone else they play a role. Now, maybe your role is to be the primary guy on your team, but are you a superstar? Probably not. And so, can you adjust to not being the guy and not being the focal point wherever you are, and just be a good person? Because good people last a long time. If people like you, they last a long time. And there are tons of guys in the league right now that their careers may prolong 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, just because they're a good teammate. Like you said, locker room guys. Is he a good locker room guy? He's a good locker room guy. We want him on our team to help our team grow. And so, and executives look for that kind of stuff as well. So like, while I'm looking for this young, inexperienced team or this young up and coming team, I want a veteran presence around them to make sure that they can kind of grow and cultivate who they are as people. And so sometimes that just helps. And so if you can become one of those players too, how much better off would you be, and how much longer would your career be?
So what I'm hearing is, have the coaches, the parents, talk to that player about, here's what, you're going to go out, you're going to always be our top scorer. You're always going to be the best. What I'm looking at is your character. I'm looking to develop your character, because obviously if I have like, a Bronny or a Mikey Williams and they're already going, like we know they're going, then my big focus would be on their, how can I develop you as a person? Because to prepare you for what's coming, obviously in addition to what your parents are saying and this and that, but either way, but like, here's what I'm looking for. Of course, I want you to go out, give your best in every game. And I want to see what you do when nobody's watching, right? The little intangibles. That's really good to have that conversation.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And have it early often.
and often, right. Because we know that the first time it's probably not going to be totally right. It's just like, hey, great. Like, and I love that about celebrating other people's victories as well, because I think a lot of times, as I tell my players, when you are punishing yourself for a mistake, you are so about yourself that now your team is playing with 4 players. Like when it comes to basketball, right? Because you're so in that, they might as well count you out for the next play or the next play. So you're basically abandoning your team to lick your own wounds instead of like drilling down and being like, hey, you know what? I'm off, but maybe I can become the greatest assist. Maybe I can become the greatest, cheerleader to hype up and bring the Scottie Pippen out of the other guy or whatever, that type of stuff. So so important. And the other question I had for you, there was one additional one. I know I wanted to ask you about the parents' advice. Oh, what advice do you have for players that might be listening to this that aren't the best or aren't yet being scouted? What can they do if like a James doesn't know about them, right? To improve their exposure, what should they be doing? What could they be doing to help themselves in the process, besides, of course, working on their game?
The primary thing the easiest way to get noticed is to play hard.
Okay.
And whatever your sport is, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, play hard. Like if you're giving your maximum effort every time, the one thing I can say for certain is coaches, especially college coaches, like you said, people love watching college basketball, college sports because the players play harder. If you play hard, coaches will maybe take a chance on you because if your skill set or your talent level isn't as equal to that, playing hard is a talent, and so or they'll call him he's a high motor guy. They'll say something like that. He's a high motor guy, which means he's always going. He's working hard. Case in point, when I was in Vegas, there's this really highly touted kid there. And a lot of NBA teams were there to watch him because it was the first chance to get to see him play. Right. And a lot of them were very upset that he didn't play. They didn't feel like he played hard. And again, you don't know who the kid
what's
is.
Going on in that weekend, or exactly.
Don't know. But for them in the moment, we came to see you, and we felt like you didn't exert enough energy to justify maybe where people think you're going to go. And so, and that's the thing. Like, and then you have other kids who are just playing hard. I like that kid because he plays hard. Yeah. And it's so simple, and it's the thing that you can control. A lot of things you can't control. You can't control if you're making shots. You can't control if you're getting the ball. You can't control if you win or lose a game. You can always control your effort, and if you can control your effort, you're in a much better situation. And so, the thing that I tell any kid at whatever level you're at, whether it's a peewee level all the way up to the pros, just play hard. Yeah. Play hard, and let the chips fall where they may, because truth be told, there's a line. Like if I work hard, it doesn't mean that I'm going to succeed. But if I don't work hard, there's a much more higher chance that I won't succeed. And so give your best, in every case, and let the chips fall where they may. So just effort, always. Just give it everything you got, and just I made it to a lower level of basketball in college because I felt like I played hard. I didn't think I was very good.
Wasn't the most talented, right?
Right, but my effort overcame my size, my stature, all that other stuff. So just play hard, and then see what happens.
I'm sure you've heard of hard work beats talent when talent doesn't, or wait, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Correct. So essentially, and I think about that kid that everybody came to see, right? And we don't know what happened. Right. And that could be the last time, right, that they take a chance on you, that they bring out the big guns, right? And then all of a sudden you're now being talked about as second tier, third tier talent because you didn't, when you were on the stage, you had the chance, you didn't perform. On the flip side, a kid they didn't come see now gets all the attention because you're disappointing. So, on that weekend. So that's, so the key is, like you said, work hard, because that all of a sudden your draft stock can go up because somebody else decided that day wasn't their day. And they, because a lot of times that's what happens. Like, unfortunately, the best kids, they get very in their feelings, and, they have a harder time with loss because they don't deal with it very often. Right.
For sure.
Okay. So I have a couple questions. We're at the rapid fire questions at the end here. Okay. And I wanted to ask you, because it came to me, best role player in the NBA right now, in your opinion?
PJ Tucker or Rajon Rondo?
Okay, I know Rajon Rondo used to play for the Celtics. Who's he with now?
He Clippers now. He's
Okay,
with the
he's with the
Clippers.
Clippers. And where's PJ Tucker?
He's with the Bucks.
Okay, the Bucks. What makes them good role players?
They know their role
They
really.
know.
Rondo has a leadership quality that is unmatched. He's not a shooter, but he can make shots. He galvanizes the team at every turn, and people respect what he does. Um, PJ is just PJ plays hard. PJ,
Okay.
out of college he didn't get drafted. He had to go overseas for a little while. Came back. He figured out who he was as a basketball player,
Yep.
and he does it to a level that is unmatched at every turn. I'm not saying that he's typically not the best player
Yeah.
on the court, but he's intense. He plays hard. He defends well. Um, he does exactly what he's asked to do, and he does it at a superstar level. So be a superstar, as they say, be a superstar in your role. I think those guys, the best way I can say, they're both superstars in their roles,
Okay.
and it makes them great teammates. And people want to play with them and be around them, and they're valuable because of that. Yeah. So
Is Luka Doncic as good as everybody says he is?
he is.
He is.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he is.
All right. All right. Well, looking for big things from him. Okay. So now into the real rapid fire questions. You just got some special ones because I was like, these are questions I have to ask.
Yeah.
Favorite snack or, was it guilty pleasure?
Cheesecake.
Cheesecake. Okay.
Strawberry
So
cheesecake.
you like the
Strawberry.
Cheesecake Factory then. You're like, yeah, that's a good
Actually, I
one.
don't.
You
I don't.
don't. Okay. So you like homemade cheesecake, or
Homemade cheesecake, or a Sara Lee cheesecake
Oh,
from the
okay, even
store.
simpler. Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. All right.
Yep. And
Not all that. Go
no,
ahead.
I will eat the cake with a fork. No knife, no cutting, just eat it with a fork.
All right,
Not,
awesome. Okay, so
it's my
cheesecake. Those of you listening, if you want to, you players, and you want to get a little bit higher draft stock, I'm just putting that out there. Maybe send him a Sara Lee cheesecake. I mean, I'm not saying he can be bought. I'm just saying. All right.
Yeah. I won't say no.
Right.
Right.
So since I like superheroes, I feel like most people that are into sports also like superheroes. What superpower would you want and
Yeah.
why?
Whew. I've thought about this before too. Um, Probably the ability to transport. So go from one place to another place in an instant. So,
Nice.
just I can go from here to Beijing in an instance, and I'm there.
Right. And the reason he chose China is because they're upping their game as far as basketball too. So that's what it is. He wants to go to China and be able to scout all over the world so he can be everywhere. Yes, teleporting. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right.
Yeah.
And do you have a favorite superhero?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I have two. For very different reasons.
Okay.
Superman, because he does everything. So whatever superpowers someone has, he pretty much has it. And again, there's some exceptions, of course, but he can pretty much do anything.
Pretty much.
He's as fast as the Flash. He's got laser vision. I mean, he's stronger than everybody. Superman. And then my other is Batman. So Batman for because he's not a real superhero.
Right.
He doesn't have. There's no powers. So like he's a regular dude out there, and he's I think about it, he's an underdog in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's the underdog. And so
except he's like really rich.
Really, really rich.
I think that's why people like him, except everyone's like, yeah, because I could be Batman. I'm like, yeah, if you were really, really rich and also had a huge issue on your shoulders about your parents being, gunned down. Yeah. I think that you broke a rule there, liking Superman and Batman, but that's okay. I'm going to let it slide. I'm a Superman person compared to the two, of course. And then, of course, we want to put the ladies in there, the Wonder Womans and all that. All right. This one's an interesting question. Not everybody has an opinion on it. I recently was told this is a first world problem. Like who thinks about this? But I still find people to be pretty particular about it. Toilet paper. Do you have to have it on the roll a certain way, and are you an over or an under?
It has to be on the roll a certain way, and I'm definitely an over as opposed to an under.
See?
I will, in someone else's house, I would switch it. I will
Oh,
switch it.
see, that was my next question. So you are a switcher.
I am a
Okay.
switcher. I am
All
definitely a
right.
switcher.
Okay, see, I am not a switcher in other people's houses, but in my house, absolutely, it's got to be an over, and I am a switcher. But in your house, like even if I drive your car, unless I am not able to touch the pedals, I won't adjust your seat too much unless it's unsafe for me to drive at that distance.
Right.
But yeah, I'm like really like don't like to mess with other people's stuff, like if I don't have to. All right,
Right.
so but are you a bathroom snooper? Have you do you
No, I'm
go
not.
okay, not okay. There are some bathroom snoopers as well, so people need to know about them. All right,
Yeah.
and then who's your personal hero?
So my mom is probably the easiest, the safest answer. My
Yeah.
mom, she raised, my dad was around for a little while, but she raised me and my three brothers pretty much by
Mm-hmm.
herself. Um, Itty bitty lady, she's about 5'2", 110 pounds, and even now she can still get us all in line. So my
I
mom for sure,
bet. All right.
which is kind of cool. But then on the other side, I have a couple of mentors that kind of like took me under their wing in my preteens, early teens. A guy named Harold Melton, he's a Supreme Court judge here in
Nice.
Atlanta, in Georgia, and a guy named Alan Bino. They're the men I want to be, and they've always kind of looked out for me and made sure that I was okay. And they're the guys that I fear disappointing more than anybody else. Outside of my mom, they're the guys that I don't want to disappoint. I don't want them to be unhappy with me ever. So they're the guys that like I look up to because they're great family men. They're great role models. They do what they love too, and that's the cool part. Like identifying what they do, what they love, and they love their families, and so they're the guys that matter probably the most to me outside of people that are actually related to me. They're the guys. Yeah.
That's awesome. If you could be remembered for one thing, or you however you want to put it, what would you want to be remembered for?
Hmm. Probably being a good person. Um, I think people want to be famous and you know impactful on like the world. I probably want to be famous and impactful on the people that are in my life. So I want to be a good person. I want people to know that they can depend on me if they need me. That I can, what's the word? That I could be called upon at a moment's notice and like just come through.
Yeah.
I want to be that person. So be honest and no one's perfect. But be compassionate, have empathy for people. I want people to know that I'm a good person, probably more so than anything else. That he was. I know some people that like they're not famous, but if they die tomorrow, thousands of people will come because they've impacted those people in some way, and even for a moment. And I want to be able to connect with people that way. So being a
Nice.
good person, yeah. So
Absolutely. What is your mental advantage?
I think I've said it a bunch, but probably the ability to overcome adversity. I think that um, I faced a lot in different capacities. There's been so many different things, and so it's not one thing, but just the ability to keep going when probably most people would stop. Um, Nipsey Hussle had a quote. He said his most endearing quality is that he just didn't quit, and I think I love that line, and it's I think it's true for me. It rings true for me as well because I if I'm in it, I'm in it, and there's nothing that anyone can do to stop me from whatever that is, whether it's this business now or me deciding I was going to play college basketball when I was a 5'2", high
Yeah.
school sophomore, like just whatever it is, I don't quit. Um, so yeah, so that's probably it.
Fabulous. Well, you heard it here, everybody. Adversity is the key to not only, help you succeed in life, but help you succeed in sports, especially from a scout's perspective, helping you to get to the highest levels of sport. Manage that adversity, pay attention to it, and figure out how to navigate it. James, how can people connect to you? Where do you want them to go to find you? And what are you working on that you want to share about?
So social media, Instagram, Twitter, it's at BTL Hoops. So on both of those platforms, you can find me at BTL Hoops. Website is btlscouting.org. Working on, we just finished our big board for the NBA draft. I'll be in Chicago next week for the NBA Combine. And, just continue to try to grow the business. So nothing, not one thing. There's a bunch of moving parts right now. So like I said, I have a bunch of people doing different things and trying to manage all of them at the same time. But our last mock draft, we've done two already, is coming right before the draft. So we'll kind of try to predict where people will go to the best of our abilities, and see what happens. But all those things.
Oh, one last question. I know this is it. Who's going number one this year?
Kate Cunningham.
Kate Cunningham.
Yep.
Just want to make sure. And when's the draft so I can get this out before then to find out if you were right?
July 29th, I think.
July 29th. Okay.
Yeah, it's later than normal, but July 29th, I think.
Okay. So Kate Cunningham, we're going to see if you go first, and that'll be awesome. And then James will be predicting the future, and everyone will be calling him if he gets that one right, which I know he will, probably. All right. Well, thank you so much, James. It was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.